Hello everyone and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. Let's see what articles and editorials we will be discussing today from the Hindu and the Indian Express. So before we start with this discussion, here is a small announcement for you all that now we are very delighted to tell you that we have arranged for all the aspirants a separate exclusively Hindi thorough newspaper analysis. मैं इसे हिंदी में भी बता देती हूँ क्योंकि हमारे बहुत सारे व्यूअर्स इसको हमारे न्यूज एनालिसिस को इसलिए देखते थे क्योंकि हम इसको मिक्स हिंदी और इंग्लिश में एक्सप्लेन करते थे। तो आज से हम जो ये थोरो न्यूज़पेपर एनालिसिस है इसको एक्सक्लूसिवली इंग्लिश में कंडक्ट करेंगे और एक और सेम थोरो न्यूज़पेपर एनालिसिस कंडक्ट किया जाएगा जो प्योरली हिंदी में होगा। तो जितने भी हमारे एस्पिरेंट्स हैं जो हिंदी में तैयारी कर रहे हैं, जिनका मीडियम हिंदी है, वो उसको जरूर देखें। So basically, you will find it on the very same channel of LawSikho. It will be with the same name as Thorough Newspaper Analysis, but it will be in Hindi और आपको वो अलग से मिल जाएगा. So yes. So with this, we will get back to today's discussion, which will be in English now. And let's see that what articles we will be discussing today. First, School Without Freedom. This is from the Hindu and it talks about the autonomy that should be given to the schools as well as the education system, which is very important so that they can carry out their own functions in an effective and in a better manner. The second article talks about historical ratification. Basically, the labor laws and the laws against the child labor have been discussed, and the situation in the whole world regarding this evil of child labor has been discussed at length. Third, a digital push for healthcare. Basically, after the COVID-19 pandemic would be over, and even in the times when it is currently going on, it is very important for every nation to have a very strong healthcare system in hand. And that is why technology and digitization of this healthcare system can be very handy. Thus, we will be discussing all of these in detail. And then at fourth, please consider, we have the News in Flash, which is a small initiative from LawSikho itself, wherein we will be discussing the small news points which are important specifically for our prelims exam. Before that, let's have a look at the various courses that we have from LawSikho. The best of those is the lot of the courses, which is the Judiciary Test Prep course, which you can definitely go and view. And the link is already mentioned in the description box. On the landing page itself, we have free study material that has been amazingly drafted for all the aspirants of judicial services, and you can download it for yourself free of cost. We have various other courses running for CLAT, SEBI, All India Bar Exam, etc. You can definitely view them. Now let's see that what is the MCQ for the day. Taxpayers Charter, recently seen in news, has which of the following purpose? First, faceless assessment. Second, faceless appeal. Third, Taxpayers Charter enumerating his rights and obligations. Or fourth, all of the above. So if you already know the answer to this question, you can jot it down in the comment section below. And if you do not know the answer right now, then keep continuing this series and definitely by the end of it, you will be able to answer it. Here is the descriptive question for the day. Despite various legislations and steps taken to eradicate the evil of child labor, the world still suffers with this issue. Argue in favor and against to this contention. So basically in the answer, you have to give some points in favor of this argument that we have still not been able to remove child labor, and you have to give some points against this as well, saying that we have been able to achieve this goal in some or the other way. The answer to this must be written within a word limit of 250 to 300 words. With this, let's start the discussion for today for the first article for the day, which talks about autonomy of schools. Basically, first let's understand that what do we mean by autonomy. As the name itself suggests that wherever we use this term auto, it means something that is able to function on itself, something that is not dependent heavily on any other factor. For example, automobile, anything that is able to move on its own using its own mechanism. Yes, of course, there needs to be a driver, but the mechanism, the machine, the engine can obviously work on its own. Similarly, autonomy is the process in which something is independent in its functioning and can work on its own. In this article, the author tries to say that in the time of COVID-19, when obviously the healthcare, the economy, they are largely at stake. But the other factor and the other sector of our world that has been largely disrupted is the education system. In such a scenario, it is really, really important that the education system in India is independent of various other factors, and so it can function easily and more smoothly. The decisions pertaining to school education were dependent on structures designed to overlook local factors to ensure total compliance. Basically, what has happened is that the schools and the education system they used to follow they have all come to a severe halt. And since they did not have autonomy of their own, they're not able to function effectively, and to say they're just not able to function at all. Then let's see that what is the current autonomy status of the schools. Firstly, let's see it about for the government schools. Government schools do not have any freedom on any count. Basically, they are governed by the norms given by the government. The employment of the teachers is done by the government. The courses, the subjects, the syllabus is decided by the governments. The enrollments of students is also done by the government. Basically, there is no any kind of autonomy that we can see on the side of the schools. And secondly, school functionaries are seen with deepest suspicion since British days, because now we know that the government has a lot to do already on its plate. And since these schools are also not autonomous in their own nature, many a times it is seen that the government falls very short in bringing the right quantity as well as the right quality of education into these schools, which is why the trust that people have in these schools is minimal or just doesn't exist. And for the private schools, professional knowledge and experience of principal and teachers are not valued by school owners and managers. And management and parents support the regimented approach of directorates and boards. Basically, even the private schools are not able to put into use various practical and creative methods of learning. Yes, we are trying to bring into e-learning and various other ways, but all in all, it is just not enough. Now let's see that how did COVID-19 affect the schools? First, metro cities are more affected than others as compared to villages are least affected. Now, there have been several surveys which have told that due to various reasons, now be it denser population or to say more interaction amongst people in the metro cities, the impact of this virus has been seen more deeper into the metro cities or to say the cities for that matter. Whereas the villages have more to say particularly been thought to be as more immune to this virus in a sense because this virus has not been able to carry itself till that far away. Next, but all the schools, urban and rural, are closed since last week of March. Yes, now if you try to draw a comparison between the urban and rural areas, yes, of course, perhaps the economy of the urban areas is more hampered. The healthcare has been more deteriorated in the urban sector, but when we come and talk about the field of education and schools, this is the sector which has been equally harmed in both the areas. Yes, the schools, now be the schools in the urban areas or be the schools in the rural areas, both of them have been harmed equally and are at a very, very bad situation. And that is why it is very important for us to understand and to bring into action and to give such kind of autonomy to these schools and education system. Let's discuss that what if the schools had some autonomy. Now, till this while we have been discussing that the schools and the education system should be given autonomy, basically let's know that what kind of autonomy we are discussing about, and secondly, what would be the benefits if such autonomy is given to the schools. Firstly, the village schools could have reopened. Now, as we know that the other activities as compared to the urban areas are better off in the rural areas, as now we are saying that the impact of COVID-19 is less in the rural areas. Had the schools in the rural areas had this autonomy which we are talking about, it was a fair chance that they at least could have been reopened. And as we know that this is the very area where education needs most of the attention. And this is the area where schemes of government like midday meals had to be given more attention, and they were the biggest cause of providing not only education to the students but also good nutrition that they need for their growth. This was the area, had it had autonomy, would have been benefited the most. But that definitely in today's scenario is not the case. Then schools could have followed the outdoor learning program, as not all learning occur in classrooms. Because we know that many times, even in the times of winter season and where the sun is shining really brightly, the teachers try to take classes in an open area, which is really a very good activity to be done. And this could have ensured the principle of social distancing that we were following to curb this COVID-19. And thus, it could be a very good step that could have been taken. Secondly, formative stages of human mind need opportunities to observe natural phenomena. Now, as we know, this could have led to further creative and cognitive development of the mind of a student. Because many a times, when we try to observe nature, it adds so much to our personality. Just giving an example, if you're studying about any kind of bird species and keeping the geographical topography in mind, we are able to see or able to find that particular bird species near our house or the school. Just imagine, there is a student who sees that bird just in a book, in a picture, and there is another student who is able to see that bird live, flying, thriving in the nature. Who is supposed to be learning better? Obviously, the student who is able to see a live and a real bird species that we were talking about. And that is why it's important that such opportunities to observe natural phenomena are given to the students as well as teachers. Thirdly, teachers can improve their teaching, because definitely this was a time when teachers could pay more attention into bringing their creative skills into more of action, and then they could improve their teaching methods. Fourth, observation and reflection are good for promoting numeracy and literacy. And let's see that what are the issues involved in this now, because we know that there are always two sides of a coin, and if there is a benefit of a particular thing, there also ought to be some or the other kind of drawbacks as well. Here, the first issue involved is learning outcomes are predefined and attainment needs to be clerically proved with tests. Now what happens is that the scope of our thinking, we have really narrowed it down. And we only tend to teach the students as much we know. And we do not try to make an initiative to learn more and then to teach more. And that is why it is believed that in such a scenario also, the learning outcomes would be very much, presumed or predefined, which definitely should not be the case. Secondly, an experience that might expand or deepen one's interest and understanding does not count as learning. Now, this is the biggest question also, which has been raised on the education system of India. Though, after the new education policy, which has come in 2020 very recently, there have been many efforts to make the learning more skill-oriented and more practical and creative. But still, in India, the criteria of gaining marks or just the ability to solve a particular maths problem is considered to as learning and knowledge. But on the contrary, when your life really tests you, you need to have skills. But in India, what all we construe as learning is just marks and simply learning and rote memorizing the syllabus, which definitely is not good for the health of Indian education. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about international labor law. The decision by Kingdom of Tonga outlawing the worst forms of child labor makes Convention 182 the first labor standard to be universally ratified. Basically, this Convention 182 of the International Labour Organization says that all forms of child labor should be eradicated. And till date, this one place, which is the Kingdom of Tonga. Basically, Kingdom of Tonga is one of the islands, one of the Pacific islands. Basically, Pacific islands are those which lie between North America and Australia in the area of Pacific Ocean, which is known as Oceania altogether. So one of those islands is Kingdom of Tonga. So it was the only island, or it was the only country for that matter, which was left for recognizing or realizing this convention. And now, it has also taken a decision that it will be eradicating this worst form of child labor, and thus this Convention 182 has become the first one to be universally ratified. Now, this needs to be understood here is that there is a difference between being ratified and being actually realized. Ratification simply means that the constitution, or to say the governance of a particular place, has given its assent, has approved to a particular international convention. But realization would actually mean when actually some steps or some to say positive steps have been taken in order to work in that direction. Definitely, now this is the first step to do it in this regard, that at least they have ratified it first, but yet we have a long way to really achieve this dream and to make it a practical one. So this should also be known that which is the convention that has been universally ratified, which convention of the ILO. So this is convention number 182, which talks about the eradication of all forms of child labor. Now let's see in detail that what is convention 182. It is Worst Forms of Child Labor Convention 1999. Basically, this convention number 182 is in totality called as Worst Form of Child Labor Convention 1999. It was adopted in 1999 at the annual international conference Geneva. Prohibits sexual exploitation of children, trafficking, deployment in armed conflict, and other conditions that affect their well-being. Complements the 1973 Minimum Age Convention aimed to prevent employment of children below 15 years. And India ratified this convention in 2017. Here is another question for you all. If you can answer it, do jot it down in the comment section. Which provisions of the Indian Constitution talk about eradicating child labor? And also, if you know, jot down the particular act that we have for the prohibition on child labor. Let's see that what is the significance of this convention and why is it important for the entire world to make it a more practical concept and to realize this as soon as possible. Firstly, under the two conventions above, there are 8 main ILO conventions. And these are 2 of them, and there are 8 of them in total. So according to these 2, millions of young boys and girls have been rescued. And till date, millions of young girls and boys have been rescued. But then again, we should remember that still millions of them are still trapped into this evil. But still, around 152 million are trapped in child labor, of which 72 million are working in hazardous conditions. Now we can seriously understand the plight that this is after when the whole world has already ratified to these conventions, but still the condition when we try to analyze on the practical grounds is really, really worse. These facts can be first noted down and can very easily be quoted also in our exams and essay wherever a problem of child labor has to be discussed. And obviously this is a very, very potential question when it comes to our mains exam and even for the essay also, because child labor is a very, very, to say, serious problem and India is still fighting with this issue. Let's see that what is the status of child labor in India. Now we'll try to analyze the status of child labor before the COVID time and after the COVID era. This is important to be done because what has happened is that because of COVID-19, the economic activities have been disrupted largely. Now, because of that, obviously, the people who have been impacted the most are the poorer people. The poorer people who were already had a very less of resources and very meager opportunities of employment. Also, the education has come to a halt. Now, in such a scenario, when education and employment, that is economy, both are in a very bad condition, it is very easy to understand that the people who were already under a lot of burden to give their children good food, education, and proper expenditure on their health, etc., they are subjected to more of pressure. This has particularly led to the children also of such poor families to involve more into the child labor now and to drop out of schools and work in order to support their families financially. That is why it is very important for us to analyze this data into 2 parts, that is before the COVID-19 scenario and after the COVID-19. So as we try to understand it before the COVID-19, so this is according to the CRY, which is the basically children relief. It works for the children relief fund. Please pardon me. And let's see that what were the available data. 10.1 million children in India were child laborers. Every 11th child is working in India, and that is from the age of 5 to 18 years. 1 in 5 children in the age of 15 to 18 age group are working. And working children between 5 to 9 years increased 37%. Basically, you do not really have to remember them, fact by fact. Just you should have an idea as to how much difference has this COVID-19 caused on the child labor as well. Urban child labor has grown by more than 50%, etc. And now you should refer these. So this is the entire scenario. So India has ranked 13 in the End of Childhood Index 2019 out of 176 countries, which is very, to say, discernible. Then after the COVID-19, the United Nations has said that the crisis may push millions of more children into child labor, especially in the countries like India, Brazil, and Mexico. And according to the new brief from the International Labour Organization and UNICEF, Child laborers may be working longer hours under worsening conditions. So this is actually a very, to say, a big reason to worry about, and that is why we should know that this is high time that now we get to understand the gravity of this issue and we work properly in the direction of eradicating child labor as this social evil. Now the article for today, next article is talking about digitization of healthcare. Basically, physicians universally agree that digitizing health records is needed to increase accountability, improve patients' outcomes, and advance evidence-based policymaking. Efforts by Indian government to digitize healthcare, federated, API-enabled, and PHR principles. PHR principles, basically, these are the personal health record principles, can be seen in Niti Aayog's National Health Stack Blue Book, Health Ministry's National Digital Health Blueprint. What are the main concerns related to National Digital Health Mission? Basically, the article here is trying to tell that, like, what happens is if you have to visit a doctor, you almost tend to carry your, always tend to carry your reports, your X-ray or whatever reports you have in some kind of a bag or something. But just imagine a time when you already have all of these in a digital format and you don't really have to carry anything. You can simply forward these to the doctor or the concerned authority or the concerned person, and he or she can have an easier access to all your documents. So it will become really very easy for both the doctors, that is the healthcare institutions, as well as the patients. But then again, there are many concerns related to it as well. Just a few days ago in our news analysis, we were discussing about the Personal Data Protection Bill, which is still a bill in India and has yet not been made a concrete legislation. And we were also talking about the bodily integrity, wherein we discussed that the very essential and crucial information about the health and body of an individual, it actually floats. This information in the time of COVID-19 is actually floating, as the government has collected a lot of data relating to the health and body parts or body of an individual. Now, in such a scenario, it is really very difficult, but at the same time, very, very important too for the government or such other data custodians who are actually in responsibility of keeping this data safe to make sure that in no any situation this data is misused in any manner. And that is why there are a lot of concerns related to this initiative as well, if it will be taken. And in some steps, it has also been taken in India in the name of National Digital Health Mission. Firstly, the issue is to ensure seamless data exchange. A standard language of communication is needed, first of all. And as we know that India has innumerous languages going on, and people, they prefer a lot of other dialects, local languages, and regional languages as well. In the similar way, the doctors also write down their reports, the prescriptions, etc. in their own regional languages. But now, if a person who got his prescription written in Marathi wants to get it checked by a doctor who is practicing in Punjab and understands Punjabi, it would be practically impossible to do. And that is why it is really, really important that we have a standard means of communication. Now, it could be Hindi or English, keeping in mind the current scenario or whatever it is. But yes, the first requirement and challenge is to have a standard language of communication. Then, free movement of healthcare data is risky, as we just discussed, because there are many times many hackers who are just sitting ready to hawk or to stall or stock this data which is available, and they can definitely misuse this data in several ways. Now let's see that how the proposed NDHM, which is this entire policy of National Digitization of Health scheme, architecture can be solved, how these issues can be solved. First, the NDHM is non-prescriptive. It allows the market to compete over developing range of applications for the facilitation of data. So basically, new innovations can be taken care of, and they can be brought in to solve these issues. And secondly, protects patients by use of consent manager framework like the UPI. So basically, health information can travel between entities with requisite permission and permanent record of transaction. So that means that if any of the data has to be used, now even if the government has to use a data which has been uploaded by an individual, the government will be liable, first of all, to take the permission of this individual and only then make use of his data, and secondly, to make sure that no any kind of misuse is done to this data. With this, let's quickly discuss that what we have for the news in flash. Firstly, India announces $500 million package for Maldives. So as we know that India and Maldives they both share very, very good relations, and India has always been helping Maldives. And very recently, India also helped Maldives in tackling the problem that it faced of measles and rubella outbreak, and India had supplied a lot of medicines at that time as well. And now also India has announced numerous connectivity measures for air, intra-island and telecommunication to assist Indian Ocean islands deal with COVID-19 pandemic. Then some of the new initiatives that would be taken are air connectivity, which is bubble for travel, direct ferry service, submarine cable, etc. So you can go through it. So basically, it's like it shows the international relations that we are developing and that we are strengthening with various countries around India. Secondly, Lebanon Parliament declared state of emergency in Beirut. Now, as just a few days ago, we studied that the capital of Lebanon, which is Beirut, it had faced a huge explosion over there, and a lot of destruction has been caused due to that. So there is a state of emergency already, and the people are into a lot of turmoil. And in this situation, this step has come after the tragic explosion last week. Now we know, and it had killed approximately 170 people. So with this declaration, the military has been granted sweeping powers and political anger and uncertainty. So the government has basically resigned. Whole of the government has resigned in Lebanon, and thus the powers have gone sweepingly to the military. Third, Prime Minister Modi. Just a second. So the third one is Prime Minister Modi has announced taxpayer charter. Now here would probably be the answer to your question. So it is actually done to honor the taxpayers that actually are paying taxes very honestly, and that is why it would be done to give them some kinds of privileges, some rights also, and also their obligations will be mentioned into it. So PM Modi yesterday launched a transparent taxation honoring the honest. So this is very important. This can be a very potential prelims question. So it should be noted. And the main areas of its functioning would be faceless assessment, so that there can be no chances of corruption, faceless appeal, and a taxpayer's charter to balance the responsibilities as well as the duties of the taxpayer, which would be fixed by the government. Then US relaxes visa norms, and as we know that President Trump had put a curb or ban on further issuance of H-1B visas, and now there have been some relaxations in that regard. So now the H-1B visas who work in public or private healthcare system or institution, they would be allowed some kinds of benefits, and they are allowed to travel. And then H-1B visa holders whose services has been requested by any US government agency would also be allowed. So this was all for today. We hope it was a good session for you. Stay tuned with LawSikho for such more sessions. Thank you.